All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Maximizing Duty Drawback with Flexport. My name is Tim Borderstrass, and I am the head of drawback here at Flexport. We have a lot of content to cover, but before we begin, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. On your screen, you will see a sidebar to the right of the main stage where you can submit questions. At the end of this presentation, we will host a Q&A and answer a few audience questions. So be sure to get your questions in early. In the same sidebar, you will see a tab labeled Docs. This is where you can download a copy of today's slides and find other helpful resources. Above your screen, you have a button to request a drawback analysis from Flexport, and we will review in further detail what this involves later within the presentation, but please go ahead and click that button and to notify the Flexport team if you would like to be contacted. Lastly, we are going to ask a few poll questions, two of them during the webinar. They're just going to appear on your screen, sort of behind the scenes. Please navigate over to those polls to vote, just so we can learn a little bit more about you. Okay. Now on to a brief legal note. Please keep in mind that all this information is provided that is provided in the session is based on the situation at this current time and may not be customized to your specific business requirements. We always recommend reaching out to a Flexport expert to discuss your particular situation. Joining me today is my colleague, Alex Niederloff. He's the Senior Director for Engineering, Customs, and Financial Services here at Flexport. And here's today's agenda. We will kick things off with reviewing drawback by setting the stage. Then we'll dive into the role of technology, followed by a few case studies that we'll review together. We'll then close it out by chatting about the Flexport difference, and we'll answer your questions. So with that, we'll dive right in. So starting with setting the stage, I think it's important whenever we talk about drawback is to understand very specifically what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about I classified something incorrectly, so I want to draw back the duties on a misclassified item. We're not talking about post-summary corrections or protests or anything that is a refund of correcting an import or through reconciliation. What we're talking about is a refund pursuant to duty drawback. And drawback is defined as the refund of up to 99% of certain import duties and fees upon exportation or destruction. And so it is a refund program. It's really an export incentive program. It's supposed to help support companies who are trying to compete on the global market to drive up their ability to compete, right? Their profitability, and it's supposed to help retain jobs within the US. And so if you're importing and if you're exporting, drawback, it might be on the table for you. You might be eligible for refunds. If you're importing, you're likely paying duties. And if you're importing today as opposed to a year ago, right, you're probably paying a lot more in duties. And so if you're importing and exporting, you might be eligible for drawback. Similarly, if you import and you destroy, so you contract a third party to dispose of destroyed merchandise within the US, you might also be eligible for drawback. And I say might because there are a lot of different ways that it does work. There are some cases where, if you don't have export documents or you don't have certificates of destruction, you can't prove the facts right. It might not be something that's feasible. But if you're importing and exporting, importing and destroying, there is likely a good opportunity for you to claim drawback on those transactions and get some money back. I want to talk a little bit about the process. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but really, I think it's important to know that drawback is it's not a fast thing. It can be faster, and we're working very hard to make it even more fast and more efficient and more complete, more compliant. But as I said earlier, right, if you're importing and exporting, you might have drawback. And so we want to talk to you. We want to understand if you have not done drawback, this is kind of where we want to dive into your specifics and understand what where the drawback is coming from, what provision or type of drawback applies to you, and then we can really round out what your opportunity is. When you do implement a program, what you have to do is submit applications. And there are some that are manufacturing, there are some that are specific to unused, but Flexport will guide you through that, and we'll even prepare the document or prepare the application, pull together the documents either from Flexport's platform where your imports and your exports might be. If you do imports and exports with somebody else, that doesn't mean we can't help you. It just means we'll work with you and be as specific as we can be on the type of documents necessary to support your drawback applications, your drawback claims. Once the applications are submitted, we pivot very quickly, right? Customs will take some time to review and approve them. If you've gone through this process before, you might have seen some lengthy timelines. We've had some long ones. We've had some very short ones. But during that time, that's when we start collecting your import and export data, your import, export, or destruction, also your manufacturing data, and we'll prepare and file your first drawback claim. Then ultimately you'll get paid within, once the application is approved, you'll get paid automatically within 4 to 6 weeks. But Flexport does offer instant drawback, which is an extra Flexport service that allows you to get 70% of your drawback refund within days, whether the application is approved or even if you don't want to wait the 4 to 6 weeks for customs to send out the payment, you want to get that money faster, it allows you to get 70% of it in a couple of days. If you're a first-time drawback filer, you will also get a desk review. We will own Flexport, and we will own a majority of that communication with customs in preparing the responses, and again, work with you on any documentation or information we don't have. And then you get into the next phase of your drawback program, which is where, if you've been doing drawback before, this is where you live, right? You continue to import, you continue to export and destroy, continue to manufacture whatever it is that your business does. And then we establish an ongoing cadence, right? When we set up programs, we do an initial look back for the last 5 years of imports, exports, destructions, and then we set up a regular cadence moving forward so that you have that ongoing benefit of drawback, and we continue to file those claims and continue to receive those refunds. And what we're going to talk about today is really relevant for a number of reasons, right? If we look at, there's no secret, right? We've seen the executive orders, we've seen how much duty is being spent. If we look at the last 5 years, we can see this is USITC data, so this is all imports, all dutiable imports into the US, the value of them and the duties. We can see over the last 6-8 months that duty value has climbed tremendously. And if we look at the effective duty rate, meaning, right, taking the duty paid compared to the value of merchandise that has been imported, we can also see that the duty per dollar that you're paying of imported merchandise has compounded significantly this year alone. So right now is a great time to rethink your duty spend, but also consider how you can get the most back for hopefully the same amount of work. So that's what we want to talk about. I do want to call out, right, at this point, you should, many of you who are claiming drawback, you might already know that, your regular duties, anything that's attributed to your merchandise, those tariffs, those duties are claimable through drawback. Your 301 tariffs, so the ones that were established in Trump's first presidency that are still around today, those are eligible for drawback. What's not eligible is, your 232s, your IEEPA fentanyl, the anti-dumping, countervailing, things like that. But the IEEPA reciprocal, your 201s, and in most cases, your MPF, your HMF are also claimable through drawback. So when we look at our software, our approach, right, when we look at the entire industry as a whole, there are 27 different provisions of drawback, 27 different types. The handful here listed on the right represent about 98% of the drawback that is filed within the US. We have unused merchandise, manufacturing, packaging, and petroleum. Each of those have different calculation methodologies. Some of them just to be simple, are calculated at the invoice line level, whereas others are claimed at or matched at and calculated at the entry line level. So each provision has its own calculation requirements. And traditional software often struggles handling the complexities of one or the other, but certainly there are a lot of times where companies who have multiple types of drawback employed, for example, unused merchandise direct identification and unused merchandise substitution, maybe even manufacturing, those programs are oftentimes executed through various workarounds, which introduce significant risk of non-compliance and also produces a higher degree of opportunity for suboptimal claims, right? If you are trying to create workarounds, there's something inherently wrong with the system that is limiting the opportunity. So clearly there is an opportunity for technology to come in to play here. And with that, I'm going to introduce Alex to talk about the role of technology as it relates to duty drawback. Alex?
Thanks, Tim, and good morning, everybody. I got involved in this project a couple of years ago. I lead the customs and trade and financial services teams at Flexport. And we always had this intuition, and Tim's team always had this intuition that there was more to gain. We looked at these claims, how this legacy software worked. And being a tech company, we, of course, have the talent internally to see what we can optimize here, and we have the mathematical knowledge to actually try different algorithms and try a bunch of stuff. So we did some preliminary research a few years ago, and we could immediately see that there was definitely more to gain here. And then we started working on this project. It has been in the market for over a year now. Some of the results have been mind-blowing, up to like 4 times what some of our competition could do with the same kind of claims. I won't spoil it. Tim will take you through a couple of use cases. What I want to do is I want to run you through like a simple example of the problem that we're trying to solve here, and to show you how complex it actually is and why it requires such a sophisticated algorithm and a tech company to actually go and fix this. So let's take this example here of just like 2 imports and 2 exports, right? And on the right, we can see the value for combining these two. If I were to write a very simple algorithm, which in computer science we would call like a greedy algorithm, I would go highest to lowest value probably. So I would take import 1 and I would take export 1 and I would get the value of 10. But then because I already took import 1 and I took export 1, I can no longer use these in any other combination. So that only leaves me with import 2 and export 2, which has a value of 1, bringing my total value to 11. If you take a better look, you should actually do the other combination, where you take import 2 with export 1 and import 1 with export 2, and that will give you a value of 17, right? But how do you systematically, programmatically get to that number? Well, in this example, it's easy. We can just look at it, or you could try all possibilities. But trying all possibilities very quickly becomes a problem. And I just want to show you how big this problem is. If I would take 10 imports and 10 exports, the amount of connections that you would have to check between all of these is more than there are grains of sand on any beach on Earth on 170 billion Earths. Like, that is how large this combinatory space is. So clearly you have to do something way smarter, way more efficient, or this algorithm will run longer than the sun will stay alive in this universe. So I would love to tell you how we did it, because it is really cool technology, but that would be like me sharing the Coca-Cola recipe. What I'll instead do is I'll say all the other things that we were able to do with this core algorithm and everything that we built around it that will get you back more money with, again, no more effort on your part. So we, of course, have the Flexport tariff simulator, like the brain of how tariffs work. And we know exactly which HS codes are eligible for drawback and which ones aren't. We can, because we are good at these data pipelines, cross-validate this with anything we have from ACE or your direct API filings. And we also are able to fully optimize the space you have in your bond, right? So if you have a smaller bond than the claim that we want to put in, we can actually split it over multiple bonds. We can cross, and I think we're the only one that can do this, we can optimize across multiple provisions automatically. So not only within the provision, we can get a much higher yield, but we will actually go across multiple provisions to get you that maximum yield and consider everything. And again, this happens fully automatically. We are able to deal with very complex product structures. So for example, sets, kits, packaging, and any other kind of like derivative provisions, we can automatically check and handle. And this was very difficult to build, but totally worth it if we look at the results. And finally, because it is proprietary software and because we fully control everything that's going on, we will actually continuously evaluate and make recommendations. So as the algorithm is running, and on very large claims, this could even take multiple days, we continuously check all the data that is going in and if there are potential gaps. So we know exactly what we couldn't put into the calculation because, for example, the wrong quantity was used or there are other data quality problems, and our drawback team will reach back out to you and help you optimize or reformat or restructure your data so you can get even more out of your drawback. And the other thing is that we can also see what data we were missing so that you can store these and use these on a claim that you might file with us later. So these are all the things besides the proprietary algorithm that we've built as a complete end-to-end product for drawback, and which is why we get to such high yields. So I'm going to hand it back to Tim, who's going to run us through a couple of case studies.
Yeah, I think before we get that, I just want to definitely applaud the work that the engineering has done. It is truly incredible software that really makes our jobs easier. We talk about which tariffs are eligible for drawback, right? If we look at the trade remedies, the IEEPA reciprocal are, the IEEPA fentanyl isn't, and the 232s are not. And when we look at the import data, there's a lot of import data where you have 301s, 232s, IEEPA, anything likely on the same entry line or on the same merchandise, and navigating what portions of the duty that's attributed to a particular import is and is not claimable is incredible. On top of that, one thing I do want to call out with manufacturing drawback, it largely, any software, it's, you go through the components, you identify the imports, but you can't go back later and say, for these components, there's unclaimed quantities remaining. Where did you, then it allows our team to go back to you and work with you on, all right, where did you source these? Were these imported? Is there a data quality issue? We can track at a component level how much is left, and then can work with you on making sure we don't leave anything on the table. On top of that, our unused merchandise substitution program, right? If you know this provision, you're allowed to claim HTS to HTS at 8 digits for a lot of merchandise, but there are some HTS numbers that, because it starts with the word other, you have to match at 10 digits. So you can't just say match everything at 8 digits. You have to match at 10 digits. Then there are some where it's other at 8 and other at 10, and therefore ineligible for unused merchandise substitution. And our software does that automatically. We can ingest import data raw, inclusive of all the tariffs, all the HTS numbers, and do the same thing with the export data and generate compliant claims for the tariffs and at the different levels. So going into the next slide, there's a real impact that we've seen with our customers. We're seeing an average of we're really seeing a gamut of results when it comes to drawback. Where it shouldn't be higher, we're seeing some increases because of more precise calculations, like unused merchandise direct identification. If you're using lot number, batch number, serial number, there's one import, one value that you can claim. But because of the way that we have it built into the same platform as our brokerage software, where we're calculating the duties to declare customs entries, we are able to more precisely calculate the drawback refund, saving you more money on that. And so when companies are more complex and more complicated, and there's multiple manufacturing, and you have flat bombs or multi-level, and you have all this stuff going on, or you're multi-sourcing, that's where our software, as the supply chains get more complex and get more large, our algorithms are able to generate anywhere from 10 to 400% more. We saw even more from a recent example compared to legacy software. On average, we're seeing somewhere around 35% increase on substitution claims. And that can range, right? It's not every claim. If it's fairly straightforward and you're really single sourcing and the costing is pretty standard for all of your commodities, there's still optimization opportunities, but the results are not going to be quite as significant. Whereas the more complex, and you have various pricing, various tariff implications over time, our software is able to generate even higher yields. And not only that, one thing I do want to call out, right? We can get 70% of that refund within just a number of days. With our instant drawback, you don't have to wait for your applications to be approved. You don't have to wait for that 4 to 6 week accelerated payment check to come through. I know they're working on ACH, and that's coming. But right now, you're able to get that within a matter of days, as opposed to waiting a couple of weeks. And so we'll spend a couple minutes now diving into some case studies. And so these are real world examples from our clients where we took their data, and we, in a day, a few hours, we're able to generate results within our software, but then took the same data and spent, unfortunately, it takes a lot longer. Otherwise, we'd have a lot more case studies. Spent a few days to a week or so to get the data into the legacy software so we could generate the side-by-side comparisons. And so here's some of the results from real case studies that we have presented to our customers, and many of these claims have been filed and paid, have been issued desk reviews, have passed those. So it's not like we're, as I said, anybody can say they claim they can get a higher refund if they also include diape or fentanyl in their refund, right? Because they're claiming things they shouldn't be claiming, or they can get a higher refund because they're not checking for the other limitation on your substitution claims. Whereas ours are completely compliant and defensible. So with that, we'll dive into the first example. So here's an apparel brand. Through our technology, we were able to increase their claim by 14.5%, bringing them up $230,000. And when we look at substitution as a good example, you have two different values to contend with: the value of the import, right, which is the value where the duties are paid, versus the value of the export, which then, if you're doing the drawback calculation, you can get back the lower of the two. The calculated being what is on the import, and the claimable being the impact of the lesser value between the import value and the export value, and what would have been the duty that would have been paid on the value of the export. And so we're seeing the effectiveness of our software nearly 2x the effectiveness of our designations, reducing the impact of the lesser of by 73.7%. And again, this was able to be done in a matter of a day, whereas through traditional software, legacy software will take a week, or in this case, a little bit more, depending on, because of the complexity of navigating all of those different tariff numbers. And there are sets and kits, and then there's different units of measure, and so it becomes a bit of a challenge. And our software navigated that effectively. So if we look at the actual results, the legacy system, the claimable, right, this is how much drawback they're going to get, was 1.58 in the legacy system, whereas ours, using the same exact data, we were able to get them 1.8 million. That was a 14.5% increase. Whereas the calculated, right, that's the import side, right? We consumed 5.7 million to get back 1.58. So that almost 4 million difference between the calculated and the claimable is now lost. You spent that money to get the 1.5. Our software was able to optimize, right? We brought that calculated down to create better matches, and we were able to consume only 2.9 to get the 1.8, saving ourselves about 73.7% of that lesser of impact, and went down from 72.4% impact of the lesser of down to 37.6. If we look at another example, this is a consumer brand. So this is a very similar story, right? We were able to get them 1.7 million more. Again, nearly doubling the effectiveness of the calculated and decreasing the lesser of implications by 33.4%. And what we want to highlight here is they had very different HTS numbers and tariffs all over their imports. They have some other, and we were able to just ingest the data and let the system do what it does, and it validates against all of that and generates a compliant claim. And so when we look at the numbers, the legacy system generated 3.9 million in claimable, and it consumed 5.1 million to get 3.9, which is pretty good. But putting the same data through our system, we were able to get 5.7. So not just were we able to get more in claimable duty than the legacy software could match at a calculated, we were able to really improve their refund by about 45%. And so the lesser of implication went from 22.4 to 11.7. So we consumed 6.5 million to get back 5.7, which is a pretty big boost. So here's the last example. This is, again, a consumer brand. Actually, this is an automotive brand. Oops, sorry, I think my screen stopped sharing.
No, you're good. We can still see it.
Okay. It went up by this is actually an automotive example. It went up by 1 million in terms of the recovery. You're going to see it on the next slide, but we saved that consuming, we saved them a consumption of 8.8 million, and we decreased the impact of lesser of by 61.2%. And we were able to improve by identifying the unmatched and tracking at the component level. So we were able to identify some additional opportunities for improvement, and we're able to actually enact change and improvements on that later on. We didn't include that further iteration in this analysis because that wouldn't be fair. So if we look at this, this slide's a little bit messed up. So I'm not sure. All right, there we go. Yep. So in this case, we claimed 2.6 million. And we calculated 18.8. So this is a manufacturing example. A lot of low value components, and you often see the lesser of impact being a bit more significant when it comes to manufacturing than you do on unused. But we were able to get it from 8. So in this case, the legacy system consumed 18.8 million in duties to claim back 2.6. We brought that down by 47%. We consumed 9.9 million to get back 3.6, and reduced the lesser of implication by 61.2% from 86.1 to 63%. So there's a lot that the algorithms do. There's a lot of great results that we've been able to realize for our customers. And again, the more complex the supply chain, the more moving parts, the more complicated, the better our algorithm can do compared to legacy systems.
Yeah, Tim, I know we don't have a slide on it because we got the news this morning, but we actually broke our record, right, this week. Do you remember the numbers?
Yeah, there was. side by side with a couple other competitors. So this is not values that we were able to run, but some side by side showed that, you know, running in our software, we were able to get them, I think in the ballpark of 6 million, 6.5, something like that. And other providers were in the 750 to $1.5 million range. So certainly something where we can turn these around very quickly, but also the results are dramatic, and we can do it fast and compliant the first time. So no research needed on at least that example. So a lot of fun stuff on that. But
nice 4.5x, yeah.
Yeah, that's a small change, small difference.
Yeah.
But you know, we're very happy with the success we've been able to lend to our customers, but we also want to offer that to you. We want you to hold us to task. If you are doing drawback, if you're thinking about drawback, you know, we want you to experience the difference, and we're happy to do a comparative review against what you're currently getting. So, right, what if the same data delivered bigger results? And what we've seen and what we have tried to show you here is that it really can. With the same data, we can deliver better drawback refunds. The same data, it's the same data. We're putting the same data through our software as opposed to the legacy software. And we're not asking for anything different than you've been providing. No new data. It's just better math, resulting in larger sums of refunds. And so we really know our algorithm is producing tremendously more, and it's not taking any more work. And in fact, we've seen that it's a lot easier when you are employing the right algorithms. Our intelligent data structures are more innate to how brokers work through data, so there's not that high level of expertise needed to get the data together, which helps streamline the data gathering and the data analysis so that we can ensure that the data that we're putting into the system is comprehensive, is compliant, and is not error prone. So with that, you know, we really want, if your drawback program is exceeding $1 million, we'll run a free, like complimentary, like no obligation, head-to-head analysis of what we could have done with your data, what we can do with your data, down to the tariff eligibility. We can identify, you know, what your opportunity is. We can show you the granularity of what is not being claimed and for what reason. So we can then, or at least, you know, at the end of the day, you have a little bit more to take home and say, hey, all right, I know I need now to get these unit measure conversions for this particular part number so I can increase my claim. But we certainly want to work with you. You know, I think if you're new, if you have no idea about drawback, one, I welcome you to have a conversation with our team. If you want to understand at a high level, what am I looking for in terms of my potential recovery, you can just take, you know, how much duty do you pay per year and multiply that by the percentage of your sales, your shipments that are either exported or destroyed versus are consumed within the US. And that, you know, X times Y will be a rough starting point for your drawback eligibility. At the end of the day, we can't get precise until we really run that data through because of how we're required to calculate drawback at a part number level, at a transaction level, or how we are allowed to claim through substitution. But we'll turn that rough cut into a precise recovery forecast relatively quickly and get you down the path of recovery. And so I do again want to plug the request drawback analysis over at the top right. If you are interested in exploring what our algorithms and our tech can do for your drawback refunds, if you want to gain some of those insights on what's not being incorporated into your claim, your refunds, and for what reasons, push that button, shoot us a note, and we're happy to meet with you and see what we can do for you. With that, we have about 10 minutes remaining. We are going to pivot over to the Q&A And a reminder to add your questions to the Q&A function to the right. We'll also open up our feedback survey at this time. Please share your feedback on today's webinar so that we can continue to curate great content for you. All right, so we're gonna dive in. I think, Alex, that I will probably handle a few of these on my end. If there are ones that you want to take, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I might tag you in on a couple of them. But the first question is, how far back can we claim drawback on the number of years? So with drawback, we can go back 5 years on your imports, your exports, your destructions, anything that you're manufacturing. So we can go back 5 years, but it's also important to make sure that we set up an ongoing process to making sure that the drawback process going forward is as easy as possible. We purchased some items DDP. Can we claim drawback if we export, and how? Love that question. One, DDP, we're not going to dive into that, but you can, with the cooperation of the importer, claim drawback on those transactions. It requires some cooperation because they're the ones that have paid the duties. Now, that being said, right, if they're selling to you, they're going to pass on the cost of that to you. And so if you export, you legally have the right, the first bite at the apple, if you will. So through drawback, because you export, you can claim drawback, and you can either work with the importer to allow you to claim it, or you can actually endorse the rights of your export back to the importer. So you just need to have a conversation with them. If you're working with a drawback broker and let's say your DDP vendor doesn't really want to share the costs or the import information with you, a drawback provider, whether it's Flexport or somebody else, I'll recommend Flexport, can work with them through an NDA to ensure that we unlock that refund while still protecting their interests. All right, jump into the next one. Are we able to use the engine and claim for drawback if the import shipment is on the Flexport platform, but the export shipment is made directly by the warehouse on another platform to the final customer? Small order. So a couple of things. One, we are full service. We do drawback for companies that only use Flexport for drawback. However, we definitely know that not every broker captures data at the item, the SKU, style, color, size level. And so oftentimes it does present challenges, not blockers, but opportunities for us to leverage our technology and our people to pull the data down from either the documents to get that stuff. So what I'll say is, you don't have to do your imports or exports with Flexport. It will make it easier also from a documentation perspective. Also, if we run into any questions or challenges, we can go directly to the broker and say, what's going on here, right? And when it comes to exports in particular, as long as you're exporting and importing and you have the documentation around what has been exported, where did it go, when did it leave, that kind of stuff, you have the import documentation available, drawback is certainly on the table and something that we can help you with. So we don't have to be the import broker. We don't have to be the forwarder in order for us to help you with your drawback program. All right, so the next question. Being mindful of time too, does your software take into consideration different duty rates across the same HTS imports? Example, if we're buying the same $100 product from China with a 45% tariff in Taiwan at 19%, will the algorithm choose the higher duty value? Yes. So that happens automatically as the data is ingested. It really takes into account, right? It's not in sort of an aggregate way. It is very transactional. The way that drawback needs to be calculated, it requires very specific data on what is imported, the entry line, the HTS numbers, the duties and fees, the values, the quantities on the import side, and then varying degrees of granularity depending also on the type of drawback. But on the export side, it's really part number level, transaction level details, and we match them up very specifically. And so in that case, it would automatically it's a little complicated. Just because it's a higher duty rate does not necessarily mean that it will generate a higher refund. But given the example of $100, in this case, yeah, it would prioritize the higher tariff or the higher dutiable recovery versus that of the lesser of. So I think we talked about this already. Can we use Flexport for drawback even with data shipments that have not moved with Flexport? So yes, yes, we can, and we do that for a number of our customers. Again, that's something that we would love to partner with you on the drawback front as well, to make sure you have the data, the documents, and that there's consistency in compliance in your classifications and your valuation. Love this one. What is your typical profile for companies who benefit from your duty drawback program approach? Can you please clarify both for the finished product and components? Yeah, so we kind of run the gambit. We have a lot of apparel. We have cosmetic companies, manufacturers, consumer goods, mining companies. We really have a little bit of everything, automotive, aerospace. So drawback does not discriminate. If you're importing and paying duties and you're exporting, there is likely an opportunity. It does become more complex if you're in the e-commerce space, you're doing direct to consumer orders, and your merchandise might be used within the US, and then you're bringing that stuff. There's some complexities there. But largely, if you're importing and exporting, regardless of the segment that you're in, there's likely an opportunity that you can take advantage of. And likewise, when it comes to imports and exports of finished goods, we see, right, the software does generate significantly more in drawback as well. But if you're importing and manufacturing and exporting, we're seeing much more in that regard, even higher refunds, just because of how we read through bills of material effectively, and being able to track the available quantities or the remaining unclaimed quantities at the component level is really a big thing that helps to make sure that we can get the money now, but without forsaking the long-term profitability of your drawback program. The other thing is, a lot of companies are focusing on exports. Also want to call out, right, it's not just exports, it is destruction. So a lot of companies there are some companies that we have, or clients that we work with, that they export, but also they destroy. We have customers as well who only destroy products within the US. I mean, clearly they sell here too, but also destroy too. So you mentioned if drawback is over 1 million, what if we've never done this before and it's not going to be 1 million? That's okay. Still reach out, let us know that you're interested. If you're importing and you're exporting, let's talk about it. Let's explore your opportunity. We just call that out because we're going to be allocating some resources in, doing those calculations. And again, when it's more complicated, we can see those larger differences, and so we want to demonstrate that. But if you've never done drawback before, our team would be very happy to meet with you and explore that opportunity the way that we normally would, and we definitely want to service you with that. So it doesn't matter if it's less than 1 million. We welcome, and we would love to meet with you and explore that with you. All right, we got 2 minutes, and I think I have time for one, maybe two more questions. But please feel free to add your questions, and we'll try to send out answers through email or separately. What was stated was the simple XY that you said we can use to see a rough. What was that simple XY that you said we can use to see a rough estimate? Yeah, so if you push the button there at the top, request drawback analysis, we'll reach out to you, and basically what we're asking for is just send us what you've sent your previous provider or your current drawback provider for your last claim, and give us access to ACE essentially, and then we'll go ahead and do that side-by-side analysis for you, meet with you, and explore what that looks like from that regard.
I think, Tim, you mentioned the base formula to kind of get a feeling for what your drawback could be. You said it's like the amount of imports, and that was that XY, I think. questions.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, thank you. So to get a rough estimate, yeah, you take how much duty did I pay in the last calendar year, and then multiply that against the percentage of your shipments, your sales that are exported or destroyed versus what stays within the US. And so if you paid $10 million in duties and 20% of my sales are for foreign customers, I can take 10 million times 20%, and a rough ballpark estimate would be about $2 million. And with that, we are at time. So thank you for all your questions. Thank you for your time. Hold on, going back to now. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you everyone for attending. We will email everyone a link to the recording tomorrow morning. And thank you again and have a great day.
Thank you.